Get John's end set up. All right, let's go ahead here and get my recording button started here. All right, so we'll be ready to go here in 3, 2. Hello and welcome into the Revenge of the Birds podcast. My name is Blake on Twitter at BlakeMurphy7. Joined as always by my co-host, the Venerable John Venerable. And we've got a special guest here tonight with a special type of podcast we have with a lot going on right now. It's a podcast first for us here. We've got former Arizona Cardinal Padric Scott is here joining us on the pod. It'll be exciting to hear a lot of his opinion on some of his time talking with the Cards, with some time in the arena and Canadian League as well. I think it's the CFL at least for that. Talk a little bit of Cardinals football and just a lot of just what's been going on with a lot of the unrest and the idea of justice in the country, at least for each of those. So before we kind of get to Padric, John, how are you doing tonight? And then we'll get to our guest, who's kind of the main focus for our show tonight.
I'm good, Blake. Good to have Padric join us tonight in a very important time in our country. And Blake and I felt the need to bring in an outside perspective. And we are so fortunate and excited to have Padric join us on the call. Blake, if it's all right with you, I want to jump right into it. Padric came into the league in, I believe, 2013 with the Arizona Cardinals. Before we get into everything that we have just on top of the agenda, what was that like, Padric, coming into the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals, with somebody like Bruce Arians? Just talk to us a little bit about that.
It was definitely a life-changing experience for me. Bruce was a phenomenal coach and phenomenal guy who knew his players very well. And I would say I was for sure blessed with the D-line coach that I have, who I believe is back out there, Coach Buckner. Buck was somebody I formed a great relationship with. I still talk to off and on to this day. And, his mentorship is one thing that guided me professionally, even where I am today. So beyond just ball, it was preparing me with a mindset that I wish I had, that I have now, I wish I had when I played. It was definitely a great and phenomenal experience to be a part of a unit. And then the bonds and friendship that I've carried from that are still, tight with me to this day, from guys like a Ronald Talley or, a Jonathan Cooper or Earl Watford or Alex Okafor, and the list just kind of goes on. So it was for sure a phenomenal experience for me.
That's awesome, at least for that. Yeah, I know the fun thing that was I got connected first a while ago with Padric, just going over a lot of the fact that we made some connection. I think it was on Facebook for the most part was where the connection took place. And it was fun to be able to kind of just going out and rooting like every week, like each practice, trying to get some of the updates being there. And it was one of those things where it just sums up with how, you can be a fan of, not just, teams, but also being able to be fans of people and players. And what was also great was just the level of difficulty to be able to get to the NFL. I think we still always underestimate it and take it for granted. So it is quite an accomplishment, at least, that you're able to go join a league, be able to dress up in the uniform, be able to get everything ready and be there in the league. And some of it also, I think, has to be because of just the I think a lot of people we talked about coming out. I think, didn't you run I think it was a 4.9 40 or something like that at like 300 pounds once?
Yeah, when I got brought in, it was a 4.89 at 310. I'm sure that helped a lot. And then of course on the bench had some very high numbers there. So was definitely blessed to to have put up the numbers in pro day and to have the attention. And I never forget draft day and how it kind of all went down. And one reason I chose the free agent contract with the Cardinals was that they were so honest in terms of how the draft was going to go. From the call I got that morning from the GM to Buck talking with me throughout the draft, he said, "Hey, I just want you to know, we pull anybody as a D lineman, it'll only be you." He said, "I'm a man of my word. Here we are. We got 2 picks in the 6, 1 and 7. But if we go, it'll be 2 running backs, tight end. But we're going to bring you in. But if we don't go running back, it's going to be you." And they went running back, Andre Ellington, Stephon Taylor, and then they went, I think, Jefferson in the 7. I was like, but it was no tackle taken. And he stayed true to that word and, had the opportunity to come in and compete, put a strong foot forward there. And, hey, things happen. But for sure, definitely takes a lot to be able to get to a level of that, because at the end of the day, when you reach that level, you become a part of that 1%. And so those principles that got me there and allowed me to play professionally have just, allowed me to be where I am today. So very thankful for it.
Absolutely. Just to get into that top 1% in your professional field is a huge accomplishment, especially on a Cardinal team in 2013 that ended up being pretty good. And that was the start of a really good run for this franchise. So let's talk about post-Cardinals, the time in the Arena League, or is it Canadian football? I'm sorry. Was it Canadian football or Arena League, Blake?
No, it was the AFL, and I remember specifically because I was a part of the Arizona Rattlers for their scouting crew. I got brought on sometime around, I think it was late May, where they were in the middle of they were undefeated at the time. They had someone who left for a kind of an actual scouting job with a collegiate team. So I came on at least for the Rattlers, and I remembered at the time that Padric, you were out there at least as a free agent, and so that was one of the things where part of my job was to find players to submit. And I had put the report onto my boss's desk, at least, for like, here's the stuff, here's some of like the tape, some of the connections I had. And the very next day, you were signed by the Philadelphia Soul. I was like, dang it, like we missed out. And so that was part of my experience. Is like, dang, you could have gotten them in for all of that. So it was the only time they played the Soul, I think, as well, was the first game of the year, if I remember correctly. So you joined, I believe, after the year had started.
Yep. Great. That was a great time. And the San Jose SaberCats had reached out, but I had signed to the CFL. And then from there, they went more Canadian D-line based because they have to have Canadian numbers there by mandatory rule in the CFL. So the first stint there didn't go so well. So ended up going to the Arena League and then, like I said, working the way back to the CFL. And it was with the Philadelphia Soul. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That was I was tough, at least for that one. When I think I remember something where he either, I don't know if it messaged you or something, but I remember something about the SaberCats having interest, at least, that had gone around with the league, and I was like, man, because that would have been fun. We had one of the highlights we had with the team that year, because they did go on at least to win the championship that year, and then that was the last one for a while, but there was still at least a need they had for some younger linemen, and it was a great experience to be able to bring in and see a lot of the guys who were playing for love the game. Some were trying to get another chance. Some of it was just the fact that football is one of those sports where it is addicting once you get into it, and it's difficult to make up decisions to be able to leave. And that was one of the hard decisions I had, was making a decision to try to go try to see if I could get to a certain level, or try to go and pursue a lot of my own financial future for that one. And that was part of what I ended up making the decision with when leaving the internship and heading back to school, at least after some of that. So talk a little bit about your time with the Arena League, because if I remember correctly, didn't you have, I think, 2 sacks in the first 4 games that you played? It was like you kind of came out, people said like you came out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, we missed out on this guy. And that's really what the Arena League comes out as, those little players who can at least put in the work and be kind of just found and just get that opportunity.
Yeah, it was definitely a blessing to finally get that opportunity. Having come there, one of my best friends is a DB with the Soul. That's kind of how the connection happened so fast. And literally on the flight home, got a call from them, a plane ticket. Next thing I know, I'm in Philadelphia. Next thing I know, I'm playing a football game again. Right off 2 airplane flights. And then absolutely right after that, 2 sacks, and that 2 to 3 game, that's period, kind of ending the season off, with the Soul. And so that was just a phenomenal experience. You come from, a time where everybody kind of almost labels your value, right? That's basically what a GM is almost like, establishing a fair market value for a player. And so when you feel misvalued, you definitely take that to heart, no matter how often people may say this is professional, it's not personal, but when someone's livelihood is on the line, it's personal. So to now go out and, just sack the quarterback, crowd goes wild, and have that feeling again, and do it again right after that was for sure a phenomenal experience.
So you were a great athlete growing up, playing football at an early age. What got you interested in the game? And, as a young man, was it very therapeutic for you to be into sports, or you were so heavily into sports and also a high-performing academic individual? Talk about that balance that you had, and was football always your number one?
Sadly, I'd say football was for sure my number one. I think it was something I almost, made an idol in life, because, you wanted it, you ran after it. And so for me at a very young age, my father loved football. My family loves football. My father was a team dentist at Florida A&M University. And so I grew up on the sidelines, game in and game out, watching things go on. My brother was involved with an accident when he was younger, and so he couldn't play, his whole life. He only got his senior year to play. And so to watch him, then for me, I kind of internalized that I wanted to do, for my brother. He's always been my protector. And so just on the field, always kind of shine from 5 years old up. And now in my household, on the academic side, it was, that was a thing that was you couldn't compromise it. It was one of those non-negotiables. And so for me, seeing my sister be valedictorian, seeing my brother do the things that he accomplished, it was one of those like no-brainers. Matter of fact, I knew I was going to excel there. I don't even have a picture from my high school graduation. I don't have a picture from my college graduation because those were things that I really didn't cherish like that because I knew it was going to be there. And so I would say the balance that was required there was honestly just being purpose driven, understanding that it was something in life I was chasing, and it was greatness. I just didn't know what the form looked like at that period in my time of my life. And as Blake, you mentioned earlier, football can become so addicting to the point where it's really hard to step away from it. I see that a lot with players. And I think it's because they're chasing that same greatness they felt as a kid, and they feel like it's only tied, to the sport. And so I was finally glad to finally find that space for me where that greatness could be achieved, and it didn't have to be with football. I remember even turning down a job with the NFL team of North, I won't say, but they offered me a job on their staff when I was 28. And in May of 2018, I turned down an NFL job where I could have got back to football. And I think that's when I knew I was free from the clutches of it. I love it. It's a game that unites, men and women of all colors and creeds. And it's one thing that there's no division on. We just have a common goal, and that's to win the game. So I for sure love the sport. I for sure love everything it offered me. But like you hit the nail on the head, it can be very addicting. But one thing I would say football taught me with that balance, John, as you mentioned there, is discipline. The power of discipline, the power of sacrifice, and that's how that balance was achieved. Through AP classes in college, AP classes in high school, taking college classes in high school, the success in college, and then now to this day, right? As an advisor, I find myself not only running a practice, but I'm always studying too to better myself for my clients as well. So really, the same things that I was doing then, I'm still doing now. It's just that the energy is a little repositioned.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, Padric. So talk a little bit about what you are doing now, at least, because that's where a lot of people, at least with post-football career, it's something we don't really think about, but it's something where, everyone, at least who's plays football in college, goes on, and there's, like you said, there's 1% of people who can make it to an NFL roster, and then there's even some 1% of that who end up being it just because the game is that crazy. So what's some of what you're doing now as far as with your career, at least post NFL?
Gotcha. In terms of what I do now, I work with people who hate taxes. Work with business owners that try to pull things together. And so that's just really who I spend a lot of my time with. And that was just born from, being in the NFL, not understanding, wealth management and how those things, shake. And a lot of my players and my teammates didn't either. And we always watch these ESPN 30 for 30 brokes and say, oh man, how could a guy become, lose all these millions? And I watched it in my face with actions and habits. And so for me, that really caught my attention more than medicine ever could. And so that's when I started kind of gearing towards, wealth management and finance. And so when I got cut from the Arizona Cardinals, one of the first things I did was look into banking, industry and jobs there to try to get my foot in the door. And so been in finance since 2013, was selected for a full-time contract with Northwestern Mutual, coming out of a season with the CFL in the end of 2017 going to 2018, and just have really established myself here, thank God, with Northwestern Mutual, the practice that's ran here. We oversee a practice that spans about 25 states right now. And just I've been blessed to be named the top young advisor, in the North Florida, South Georgia region 2 years in a row. And so that's, what I'm doing now is working with people, on the investment management space, the risk management space, and just really trying to integrate that for great outcomes. So that for me has been, my piece, my baby. It's been my football, right? That's what I love to do.
Yeah, you can tell, for those of you listening, why we were so excited to have Padric on the call today, especially when we get into some of these additional topics. And I want to transition now, Padric, to the Rooney Rule. Blake and I had a conversation about this last week, and we got through it, but it really just didn't feel appropriate. And to have an outsider's opinion, the way the rule has come about publicly, I would think there are a lot of folks in the media, players, aspects of it, just have feel like it's either been used incorrectly or abused, and they're constantly looking to tweak it for the better. Why do you think it's been so difficult for owners in the National Football League to make a consistent effort to at least take the time to seriously interview and consider people of color, either for general manager positions or head coaches?
Whew, that's a deep and
It's a
a
loaded question, I know.
loaded question, my friend. I'll just say this. Um, Having gotten into a space where being with a lot of movers and shakers, and that's some of the highest movers and shakers that can exist. Um, you often have like a club, right? And in that club, you try to keep the club. I hate to say it, a lot of times how it looks. And so when you have that level of interaction, it becomes hard, I think, if there are some things that aren't spoken on the table about how maybe some people may feel, then it becomes, how do we let somebody in the door we don't quite maybe want them in the door? I hate to say it to that degree, not trying to insinuate anything. And so if we have a system that's been built and established to favor certain demographic, and that has been accepted, then most people don't like changing that. I think one of the most insightful conversations I had with somebody who even told me they didn't like me for my color of my skin. And he told me that he never saw himself wanting to ever fight for equality because he felt that favored him. So I think when you just take thoughts like that some people have, and if those can be echoed, I think you have, the effects of people saying, not arriving at sound decisions when it comes to things like the Rooney Rule. So I'm not trying to speak high level above like a lot of certain systems there. But I think the point is kind of felt on why such a rule, might be tweaked and altered, and not really able to find out a sound decision, in which certain things are needed, though, to just try to give a shot, right? Because there's some individuals who just need a shot the same way a player deserves a shot. Coaches, GMs, owners, and people in this space that can be very well deserve a shot. And I think that's just something we got to seriously look at to try to put something out there. So maybe a young American, black boy who may look at this and say, I can be more than just a rapper, actor, or whatever to try to be rich. Look at this individual who's a GM owner and he's doing it quite well. So I'd say, man, John, that's a loaded question, but I know I may have skated around that there, but that's kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah, well, John and I were able to talk, and the numbers at least speak for themselves. When the Rooney Rule was instituted, there were 3 coaches who were minority in the NFL, and you look at where we're at currently, all these years later, and there's still 3 minority coaches in the NFL currently, and it's just a case where you're, like we're saying, if your whole goal is to try to bring in the best of the best, making a meritocracy in the NFL. That's what a lot of people want, to be able to believe that, anyone can come in, whoever the best player is, the best coach is, the best of the best. And when you're looking at everything, it really feels like that the NFL, there's issues. Like you even just said, there's a person who said, hey, I really don't want you to be here because I feel like that it's going to hurt my chances. That is definitely the opposite of what people are looking for. And I think it's the opposite of what a lot of people feel like America ultimately is. So that's, I think, some of the transition that we can have. And right now there's, I know, a lot of discussion, a lot of national tension and unrest. John, I know that was something where, even though this is ultimately a football podcast that we have where we cover a lens through a specific team, we felt like this was something that touched every single part of football and other people's lives. And so the names of people like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and recently David Dorn, these are names that are being proclaimed all across the country as people are looking. And John and I were kind of discussing, hey, we're 2 white males who are here. We just don't have the same type of perspective. At least we're obviously wanting to learn and wanting to be able to grow as much, just because we haven't had a lot of the same common experiences. So Padric, I don't know if you'd mind sharing some of your experiences growing up, at least as a black man in America, whether that's with football or just in other parts of life, and just with all of this idea, at least, that people are having, discussing ideas of whether it's brutality, and just trying to make sure that we can have this whole mission toward finding what justice and equality, what that really means right now in the U.S.
So I think this is a very appropriate conversation. It's one found myself working and having often. I work in an industry and a profession that is, of course, ultimately, white male dominated in wealth management. So a lot of my peers and closest of friends, right, have come to me with the same opening statement there that you just shared. And we've been having some deep conversations, in my office personally. And I'll just echo some of the same things we've been talking about that they now kind of or see like, wow. And before, it probably would have been hard to have this conversation, I think, early in my life, but I think now I've gotten to the point of understanding what I think the disconnect is. And as you mentioned, I think it comes back to a very powerful word that we as human beings like to give when we want and take away, and that word is actually empathy, right? The ability to now put yourself in someone's shoes and try to feel what they're feeling and not judge it or compare it based off, your own experiences. I see this a lot, for example, as a wealth management advisor, and I may think something's easy, logic, complete to be finished, but to the person sitting across me, maybe there's something that they have going on that they have experienced that makes them want to act the way and not do the things that that would probably be in their best interest. So it takes a lot of empathy for me to sit there and feel where they're coming from so we can now arrive at sound decisions. And I think what I've arrived at recently is genuinely believing and hearing that, I think the issues we've had in this country stems from the fact that since someone wasn't able to, like you said, experience those experiences, now becomes, I don't really see it. I'm blind to it. And I used to think that was like a false narrative, like, oh man, you see me suffer, you see this happening, and then we talk about it. But then you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to be viewed as per se like the angry black guy. And now what I've just come to realize, it took these level of incidents back to back to back to back occurring to now make people go, wow, something's wrong here. And I have some friends who feel, hey, what do you mean now you notice this has been happening forever? But also now see that it just took something to spark that empathy. And I think back on my own life, as you mentioned, we talk about, personal experiences. I think the first time I realized that, we're not, when some people say they don't see color, often think to myself, I wish the little boy in me could agree and say he didn't either. And the little boy didn't for a long time until the little boy found out he was black. And, being the son, of a dentist and the son of an educator, and my mom, dentist, my father, growing up in the suburbs. I'll never forget going to the pool one time with my buddy. And I actually posted about this, and it was crazy because he came and commented on it. He was angry because he remembered back when we were young, like we were kids. And, you just go to the pool, and now people want to get out. And then they ask, what are you doing here? You belong here. It's crazy that my family, had been there longer than a lot of the other families. And it was always this thing of, did you break into the pool? Did you break in here? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you even belong here? And all my buddy could sit there and just say, it's like, oh my God, what do you mean? Like, what hell's wrong with you going on? We're just kids. And so that to me was like an opener. Wow. And I don't think that really even hit me as hard until the moment where my mom had the true talk with me of how we have to act and behave to just almost have a chance to continue to see another day. Was when spring break, 12 years old. I'll never forget this. I went to FAMU, DRS, but then I transferred from middle school. So it was Griffin Middle School where my mom taught. And my best friend who went to elementary school with me, he went to middle school with me also. And then she took he and I on vacation with her because it was spring break. So of course we were office students, she was office teacher. And we went over to like the Daytona Beach area, stay with some family friends, and we ended up going to a store. And while in the store, of course, mom always says stay close, but we wanted to kind of go look at the kids section. So she goes to the fitting room. We just want to go check out the kids section, right? No harm in that. So we go over there to like the boys section, look at like some FUBU clothes and different things, and we walking over there. I'm noticing these eyes just pierced on me, and I tell my good friend, I say, AJ, you see this? Like she just won't stop looking at us. What's going on? Like, man, it's crazy. There we go, she goes. There we go, she goes. And so we kind of like, like Scooby-Doo and say, hey, gang, let's split up. So we kind of like, as we get to the section, we kind of split up. And sure, she kind of stays on me. And as he comes back to me, now she's kind of in this like, the owl of kind of being cornered is like, oh, no, you touch me. Like, man, we're like, no. my boyfriend's the manager. You don't even belong here. What are you doing? We trust. I'm just like, and just hurt. Like, what the hell's going on? So sure enough, now she runs, and now bigger guy comes out, and here we are, 12 years old. And so now he just starts scaring the hell out of us. You can feel it in the tone, and all these other kids, other people here, we're the only ones like us. And now it becomes, running us out of the store, and it becomes like, mom, mom, mom. And so the mom comes over. Now he kind of, and then my mom basically lets him have it and kind of grabs us, and we leave, puts her stuff down, we leave, and then now in the car it becomes, see, this is why everybody doesn't, you can't just, and that was to me like just a life changer. And then from now you experience, being riding with your dad, and dad having a nice car, and then the cop pulls father over and asks, hey boy, what do you do to drive this? My dad worked hard. My dad went to Harvard, served on the naval base, first, black dental officer there. His stories were, even crazier, having had, patients in which wouldn't go in, they request, hey, I don't want a black dentist working on me. Can you find somebody else? And so I remember him walking out, and this one story here on Paris Island there, and white dentist goes in and tells her, well, ma'am, we have a dentist from Harvard who specializes in a certain style of treatment, and we can have him come work on you, but that's what your son needs. She said, yeah, I want the dentist from Harvard. And then they call my dad back in there, and she looks, dumbfounded. Then now, the husband, of course, played with my dad to really understand where she had come from, to understand, different things, look out for it. And he passes, and now they become kind of, connected there. But those are just countless and countless experiences. And the one that probably was the scariest for me would have been, of course, post I was released. It's probably like 2014, 15. I'll never forget riding home. I was with a friend leaving like a party by FAMU, and on Bruno Street in Tallahassee, like this one-way street that's not well lit at all. Woo-woo, cop pulls us over. Next thing you know, we're out the car, handcuffed on the hood. Like, what is going on? Now gun gets drawn. It's like, hey, calls Buddy. Buddy pulls in. Dog starts, quote unquote, searching the car, and it's just like this ride of questioning. Things are going on. I was like, oh my God. I'm just asking, sir, why are we just being handcuffed? What did we do? Was it speedy? Was it that's what's going on? He's like, no, don't talk. And I was like, sir, can I just ask what's going on? I said, sir, and I started name dropping, because I know the higher ups there in the force, just from the family and connections there. And now you hear like tone of voice change. And then it becomes, he calls his buddy's name. Hey man, yeah, he's good kid here, good kid here. We need to let's let him go home. Let's let him go. Let's let him go. And you can't get upset, right? And I got friends of mine, most friends, white friends, would be like, who'd be like, oh, dude, what are you doing? And could have went off on him and probably made it out of that. But me, all I'm thinking about is, please just let me get out of this. Please just let me get out of this. Please just let me get out of this. Because now when I get in the car, I can't act. All I can do is punch the steering wheel, because there's nothing I can do, because the thing I don't want to do is, have put my family through what I had to experience when I did get cut from the Arizona Cardinals that fall. One of my best friends was a victim. John Farrell was a huge case here in America, in North Carolina. They did an ESPN story there. He was my college roommate at FAMU, and, had an accident in Charlotte, North Carolina, went to go ask, for help. Lady, instead of, knocking on the door, I guess she thought maybe her husband was going to open it all wide. And here she goes. She closed the door. She calls police. Instead of asking for ambulance, he said help, calls cops. Cop shows up. He's like, hey, help, help, help. Officer, bomb, pulls gun, shoots 12 times, hits him 10. And he's just asking for help. Even the other guys are forced it around him, just like, what? Body cam shows it all. And then now the unrest comes, because at that point in time the narrative, it's going to become trying to figure out what was wrong with John, what could have been wrong in his past, paint him as having done something wrong. He's been a phenomenal man, was engaged, ready to get married, always did the right thing. He was the quiet guy of our friend group who would keep people together. And now go to trial. His bail was set 45 out. Then, hey, another jury tried to indict him. Then next jury, now all kind of white jury, boom, hung jury, cops off, no justice served. And now, his mother has to know that the person who just killed her son asking for help is still out there. And so you take those cases, what's happening right now, sure, I know it's hurting a lot of people, but this has been a reality for a very long time. It just has not been something that's just happened. It's been going on for a very long time. And I will say, though, this cadence of, I guess, back to back to back to back happening has finally been a thing to spark empathy. And so if there's any good, I would say, that can come out of such bad or such evil, I would say it will have been the conversations that have been sparked, that are being had, that we're having now, that we're having like right now. I think they're so needed. So we as a people can talk, we can empathize, we can hear experiences, and now draw towards this cause of, you know what, hey, this isn't right. Because no one's asking for nothing special. They just want justice. I believe if somebody commits a crime, they should go to jail, right? Our family in law enforcement, family that, have served. My middle name, Herndon Bivens, comes from a former war vet who was lost in Vietnam, giving his life for his group. So that's where I come from. So I believe in the principles that we stand on. I think those principles, when they're not, when they're not found for a certain group of people, I think that's where the unrest comes in. Because we just all want the same level of justice. We just want the same level of treatment. Will anything in life ever be equal? Probably not. But I think it should be to some degree fair, and color should not be the basis on what that stands on.
Yeah, incredibly well said. Thank you so much for just sharing those experiences with us. I think for so many people, one of the reasons it's so difficult for them to get on board with equality, with justice for all, is they don't have those experiences, and they have to be educated, and they have to listen. And that's what Blake and I hope to do tonight, every day, moving forward. We want to make a conservative effort to make sure that everybody is heard. Not that we weren't doing that already, but I think it's important for folks to understand that just to open your ears and your hearts. I do want to ask, just in relation to your time in football, in the NFL, we've had Vic Fangio go on record recently that there's not racism in the NFL. It's a very racist-free area. Drew Brees made some comments today about he still didn't agree with Colin Kaepernick's protest taking the knee. I mean, that was going on really in the thick of when you were there in the league. And now you've seen, as we fast forward 7 years later from that, and the difference in protesting now. Why do you think it's been so difficult for so many players, coaches to see that message from Colin? And now it's been taken to a different level. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
So not being in the league, I feel very free to comment on this. And I would have commented on it had I been there, because like I said, that time would have been after actually I was already out of the NFL with everything happened with Cap there. I would say there's a group of players who didn't mind speaking about it. But also those same players who didn't speak, who may have felt that way, also think about I hate to say, you got to make a choice sometimes. It's like, do I speak up for what I know and believe in, or do I keep my paycheck coming in? And a lot of people will choose their paycheck because they still got to provide for their family. And football is one of the few spaces that you now can create that level of income. I mean, in wealth management, we call that a home run bucket. There's not too many places you can just go perform, and your services are so high in demand, you can get paid millions for it. So what you have is a lot of individuals who won't speak up because they don't want to lose, right, what it is they had. And so let's say if we go back to Colin, it's amazing that we could view that as being, something that was wrong. It's often said that the individual who told him to kneel was actually an Army vet saying, hey, it would be more disrespectful to sit, more respectful to more so kneel. But let's say if we come off of that, I think now the question becomes is that we're questioning the method. What's sad in this country is a lot of times we question the method, but not the message. What we should be questioning, though, is the message. A lot of people saying, oh, man, I don't believe in a black man being killed, but they got to stop looting. Well, I think that's said wrong. It should be more so like, hey, I don't believe in looting and rioting, but this has to stop. Because as you mentioned, right, the Rooney Rule, and when it went in effect, 3 coaches then, 3 coaches now. Well, guess what? When protests were happening in the 60s, protests are still happening now. And a lot of people like to quote the great Dr. Martin Luther King and his peaceful approach to protesting. When I don't think anything can get more peaceful than just simply kneeling. And also, if you look at back in the 60s when Dr. King peacefully protested, you know, a lot of people show the picture of him walking hand in hand with everybody, but they don't show 5 minutes later attack dogs being set out on them, legs being bitten off, things, you know, there are people who were water hosed down, people arrested, killed for just peacefully protesting. Fast forward 50 years later, guess what? People are peacefully protesting, being attacked. So what do people do when they feel like their rights are infringed upon? I believe our founding fathers taught us that when we feel our rights are infringed upon there in the Boston Tea Party, right, we riot. And it's amazing that we glorify that riot with fireworks, but we're demonizing this riot in terms of how dare you. But our country was built on rights being infringed upon and people and rioting. So I think if we just take that out and just go black and white, it has to become a message of, okay, someone's not being heard and they're just simply trying to be heard. And at some point in time, if we don't listen up, it just keeps going from there. And so that's why I said, to me, it's so important that we have these levels of conversations, because I think what's happening is the wrong messages are being perceived because there's a lack of empathy, because someone didn't feel, they think it couldn't have happened. But now when you see it happening in your face, the videos there, you can't deny some of these things that we're seeing, like that one for sure in Minnesota, and like that one in Georgia with Ahmaud. Now it becomes, you know what, now it's time to address the elephant in the room. And so if that took, 50 years plus a couple hundred on top of that for us to be able to do, then I'm glad to see in this country it happening, because I never thought I'd see it happen. I thought this would just be the way. But I'm hopeful, though, that we can all work together. We can have that level of empathy and continue to have conversations like, John, you and Blake and I are having right now.
Yeah, that's really, really well said, Padric. I appreciate hearing all of the context. And I also know that just from my knowledge, there's people who are listening to the podcast who will have either different opinions or agreement. And there's a lot of people I know out there who will have maybe even opinions that will, and again, it comes back down to experience and empathy. Some people may end up having an experience that they have. It's like, no, this is what your experience is. My experience has been this. And I think it's important to be able to look at the empathy, like you said, on all levels, to be able to see, like, one of the biggest things I know that I remember from a few years back with the Cardinals that was related was there was an officer over here. His name was David Glasser. I actually had a relationship with him on Twitter, and he ended up going, was one of the first responders to a scene, and he ended up being shot, died on the scene with that one. There was a kid who had stolen his dad's guns. It was outside, at least for that one, said he was going to go and either rob or kill. I don't remember the rest of the details, but it was a man who then was, going out there, was taken away from his two kids. And I was like, to have to think about being in the shoes of someone like that when you're talking about how, and I think there was some thousands of people who went, everyone talked about like where he was and what he stood for. And to think through as far as the level of empathy is that I don't think that this is really a fight against the idea of whether it's the fight against the police or fighting against African Americans or fighting against people who are white. I feel like this is ultimately trying to find justice and to stop brutality. And it's been disappointing to see, like you said, Padric, people twisting the message, getting a lot of those other things that are there wrong. And I think that's part of where I think by having some more of these types of conversations to be able to share aspects and be able to grow at least closer together versus trying to, I think, push further apart, I think is one of the most important things. And ultimately, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like that football in general as a sport, we've talked about how it can bring people together who are of different places, whether it's supporting a team from different areas. Do you feel like the sport yourself has been a player? Is there an area where do you feel like that ultimately it is, and maybe it's wishful thinking, something that can bring people together or that teams can bring people together? Or is there always something you feel like that's going to get in the way when it comes to the sport?
that there again is a loaded question. And first, let me say, you're absolutely right. A lot of times I want to backtrack there to something you said there, Blake, about, like you said, people twist the narrative, because if I see an officer gunned down, I'm going to grieve for him and his family. And I'm going to demand justice because it's not right. But like you said, people will twist the narrative and say, oh, where were you there? Oh, I was there grieving too. Empathy. But where were you, like you said, in that same token when this happened to Trayvon? Because that happened, like you said, I was 2013 there. I'll never forget us all watching that together in the locker room, just waiting what's going to happen there, hurting, waiting that was going to happen. Ahmaud, Floyd. And so it has to become this thing where it's just about the justice aspect. It's not about a side. It's about justice. And I think we all, as an American people, those are principles we stand and pride ourselves on, and being the land of the free. Well, that should be free for everybody. And that's simply what I think the messaging is trying to get across. And now to the football side, I will say for sure, football is such a beautiful sport. It is pure, right? It's individuals out there, in a common, united for a common cause to achieve a common goal. And it's beautiful to watch people from all different backgrounds just know that they have each other's back in that moment. And so I think that can be very symbolic of, I think football is one of those spaces that probably, has one of the greater bonds of brotherhood. But definitely when things happen, you can kind of see the differences in ideologies, sometimes even in locker rooms. I think you see it a lot in high school ball to this day. I'll never forget, playing ball. Now, this was a different team of mine, but, like I said, being a better athlete, I put a guy in the grounds, an O-lineman, running back goes to scores. He spits up my helmet at me and says, get off me, you. And so now from that, it becomes like, really? It's a game. The game's supposed to be pure, right? And so the game still has its elements, right? For example, we can have 3 coaches. We can have an all-black team. That's fine. But I don't really want the coach or the quarterback to look a certain way in a lot of cases. And then in that case, a lot of times certain coaches get a shorter leash than others, right? We've seen countless NFL coaches who may have now we have some coaches who had like the Bengals there, or the Steelers have more longer tenure there. But, we start thinking about it traditionally, college ball across the thing, NFL, a lot of times black coaches get a shorter leash. And a lot of times it's the fans, especially in college ball, we go there because fans have more of a dictating power than they would in the NFL, because fans are the boosters and the supporters. And you see, especially in the South, just how short that leash is. And when they're asking for someone else's head, and then they'll give another coach all kind of years. So football has its politics too. But if we keep it at a team level, I do think that is an area where you see camaraderie. I think that's where you see that purity there. And we can take those level of principles and begin to apply it, as a people at large, and work towards a common goal, right? We can all just get in the dang huddle, talk it out. We may hate each other, but can we, in this play, in this moment, can we come together and see ourselves to a common end? I think that's the thing that, our leaders, MLK, when he gave his speech, I think that's what people have been dreaming and hoping for. And I'd love to see that moment happen where we all realize we're at this together.
Yeah. So perfectly put, and thank you so much for touching on these topics with Blake and I. So important to discuss, and your perspective on this is just so invaluable. So thank you for that. I do want to ask, just as a football fan now, an outsider looking in as a fan, are you able to enjoy the game now? Just like rooting either for ex-players that you played with, or do you have a soft spot for the Cardinals because they picked you up? Or are you rooting for a certain team in Florida that has your old coach and defensive coordinator?
That was a hilarious question for sure. I'll say this. Where I stand today, I look at life very black and white, and me watching football doesn't make my clients nor me any money. And so I'm not for watching it and making everybody else, eat fine. I'm more about making sure I'm doing that for the Scott legacy and for everybody that I'm blessed to manage. So to say that, I'm going to say I really don't have a team, because once you play football, you realize how much of a business it really is. And it takes away the pure part of it that you had in high school and in college and things of that nature. Now, having said that, I'll find myself rooting for my friends. I love watching Sherman. Sherman was a guy I played with at Stanford. Was like, a great leader and always has been, and just phenomenal, character in the locker room and the way he picks up, other players and younger players. Andrew Luck, having watched him before he retired. The guys I played with, at the Cardinals there, and watching Calais have had a phenomenal career and do the things he just did in Jacksonville and now going, to Baltimore. Those individuals, Michael Thomas is one of my best friends from Stanford. He's a safety now with the Houston Texans there. And so those individuals, I root, I'll watch, I'll turn on just to see them do their thing. I'll go stay with Mike and watch him play. Last game I think I called in stadium was, them versus the Patriots, and I think the Dolphins won when I was there. They always upset them down there for some odd reason. And so that for me is what the joy I get, is watching my buddies, continuously, live their dream and have that fun. That to me puts that smile on my face. So yeah, it's awesome for me to watch my guys go out there and suit up. And then I will say, if I turn on a game and I see the Cardinals playing, I'll probably find myself rooting for the Cardinals, because absolutely right, they were the team, that gave me that shot there, kind. And so instead of being bitter about it, my mindset was, if I had the same mindset and attack of life now, then the anxiety that I played with while worrying about being cut, who knows, could still be there. And so that took that bitterness completely away. That was all on me. And I wish other players could take that level of ownership. They probably could move on better from the game and not feel that addicting effect. And so I love when I turn on and I see the Cardinals win, I'll find myself cheering a lot, do those different things. So yeah, I always say I don't have a team, but if I turn on and the Cardinals are playing, they'll probably get a good level of love from me.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, that's one thing I know I took away from my internship ultimately, was finding out how many different teams people had not only played for, but then also went on and scouted for. And it just kind of shrunk a whole lot of that aspect to realize how much bigger things were. And ultimately to realize, like, hey, like I would say we follow the Cardinals, the storylines, a lot of the things is kind of where I grew up, and that's where a lot of my heart goes. But it's like, most of the time I would never find myself rooting against certain players or anything like that. Like, oh, this player changed and put on a different colored shirt, now I hate him. It's like, that to me never made any sense whatsoever. After I had that internship, it was just kind of an eye-opening thing to be able to find out, guys from different places and colleges that were there. So before we kind of get back into like talking a bit about the Cards, Padric, just to wrap up the whole conversation, what are at least some tangible things? You talked a lot about having deeper conversations, about having empathy. What are some tangible steps that people who want to be able to go? Because one thing that I at least have feeling a lot more recently is that if you're someone who is saying, well, that's not me, like, it's not who it is, it's not me, I just want to stand back. What I was told by someone, at least, who they grew up at least in a much more difficult situation. They were also grew up as an African American in Tallahassee, Florida. And that's one of the places that's, with Florida, a lot of the places in the South, like, at least for that one, I think from with FAMU, at least, he talked about how the goal is not to necessarily find someone who's just content to stand by, but finding someone who is at least an ally, being able to at least take action, not just stand by. I think back to, if there had been one ally back with George Floyd, we would probably not be having any of this type of conversation. And the fact that there were 4, police officers that were there, there were 3 people who just stood by and did nothing, at least for that. If there had been one ally, how can people like John and I or other people who do want to be an ally, what's something tangible that we can do?
Man, I think that word allies is powerful. As you mentioned, I think that's all somebody wants. I think that's why the anger happens, because it's almost like when a kid comes to talk to a parent and tell the parent what happened, and the parent doesn't believe him, the kid just gets angry and starts acting out, right? Because it's like, hey, we're not being heard. So they're not being heard there. And so I think, one, the greatest thing there are the conversations that are being had, because now I think from that tangible actions are happening. I've seen friends of mine who now I think are getting it more when they've seen injustices. They've hopped out, right, and blocked. I've being out with my buddies, and growing up in college, things like that. It's amazing how a cop may act to me, but if my homie that doesn't look like me pops up and says, "Hey man, what are you doing? Leave him alone." It's just amazing how quickly the whole situation gets diffused. So little things like that, they go a long way. The speaking up and of how you feel, I think, goes a long way, because if you remain silent, silence is really another form of, I hate to say it, support, because now it justifies to the individuals who keep doing things that, hey, if I keep doing what I'm doing, nobody's going to say anything. So even the conversations and using a platform that, like this podcast wonderfully here, and a social media platform, and being able to use that to speak out, I think that goes a long way. right? So like you said, my method may not be someone else's method, but I'm going to use my voice in the platform that I've built from sports with my social media, the followings had there, the connections made there, to use that voice to touch people. And I will hope somebody who says, you know what, well, maybe me doing this isn't me. I don't want to be out with a sign or anything like that. Well, hey, maybe use your social media to talk about how you don't, support this. And I think that's one thing I'm seeing this year in this moment that I haven't seen any before. And that's even on just the platforms of people who I know are very powerful movers and shakers who might lose some business by the things they say with some of the people they work with that I've never had expect say some things before. They're starting to speak up. Are all my counterparts speaking up? No. Some are leaving out, their messages. They don't want to, lose certain things. But I think when you just start seeing people speak up, that to me, I think lets people know and feel, hey, there's allies there. And so now when we start being in this together, we start addressing these things because the laws are in place, right? We have a wonderful judicial system there, and those different things are laws and in place. But it starts to be kind of, some discrepancies there, and we start looking at the numbers of who gets what and who doesn't get what. And so I think now we start speaking up. We start holding the individuals in power accountable because we are the American people, meaning we, this country, we hold the power. Sure, politicians can do and say as they please, but they're only going to do in terms of, what people allow them to do. So I think when we start speaking up, when we start letting our voices be heard as a people, that becomes something that's far powerful, tangible that we could ever do. And then now, however somebody want to make it involved, that's donating, supporting time, giving back to certain, community centers, counseling of certain situations, big brother, little sisters, things like that. All those different getting involved in the community. Hey, go right ahead. I think people need to see different faces to feel that, hey, I'm not at this by myself. But it's a plethora, I would say, of just tangible things we could get behind that will make a huge difference. Speaking up being number one.
Yeah, I would agree. Speaking up, I think, is number one. I think listening is probably the easiest thing to do because it doesn't cost you or anything, at least, to listen for all of that. You did talk a bit about with donating time, donating money with resources. I like to always think of everything as whenever there's resources, making sure that it's always a hand up because I think so many people are always afraid of things that are like they call them like a handout or other areas. But John and I were like trying to find what's a way that we can tangibly be able to reach out to some of the people with our community. And we talked at least about how what we wanted to do for this month is to take the what we normally would make. We don't make that much, at least overall comparatively, from this podcast, but we wanted to take all that we had and put it into two places. One was to be able to donate to the family of Dion Johnson. He's a young African-American male who was shot in the police shot by the police, Phoenix PD, in the Phoenix area, I should say, at least for that one. Just the way to be able to support the family, some of the different costs, all of the stuff that goes in, just to be able to almost just listen and be able to respond, to be able to try to bring about some of, like you talked about, Padric, with justice. The other, at least, that we had, I know, was to look at St. Louis, which is the other area that the Cardinals played in, at least. David Dorn was a retired law enforcement officer. He was a police captain. He recently was killed. And the fact that he was a part of a project, at least, that was there called, I've got it right here, the the Ethical Society of Police, which is another foundation. It's there essentially to be able to help African-American officers as well, to be able to connect with their community more, to be able to kind of be one of those allies that's there. Just the fact that it was a case where you've got someone who was, like I said, a civilian, and then someone who was there who lived to want to bring about justice for that one. We wanted to make sure that we can kind of share and be able to contribute to some of that. So if you're listening to some of the podcasts, whatever we have for downloads, if you want to share with family, friends, other things, people you feel like could hear a message at least of positivity and growing, we would love if you'd be able to share that. We're going to be giving all of those proceeds at least to that. I actually hadn't planned on, I think, talking for that one, but it just came to me too. David Glasser's foundation for As Well for Phoenix. There's a lot of you guys listening who personally knew David. If you feel like you want to give to his foundation, which works on connecting people to the community, he, I think, had almost 100, I think it was like 50 sports scholarships he gave out last year through the foundation, being able to make work posthumously, at least for that one. If you feel like that you're compelled for that one, that would be one of the things you can at least help make a difference for all of that as well. John, I don't know if you have any comments that you wanted to say for some of that.
Yeah, we've seen so many people within social media wherever you're interacting with folks right now, give back. And it's a small thing that Blake and I are doing, but we want to make sure it's emphasized that whether it's with your time, whether it's with your money, whether it's just listening to folks on a perspective that you didn't think you were going to have a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month from now, anything is better than the status quo. And taking those necessary steps moving forward is what we have to do as a country, as a community. And hopefully you took away some of that tonight on our podcast. Hey, Blake, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I guess I was for that one. Yeah. Padric, I just want to say thank you so much again for joining us. Just be able to get your perspective for that one. It was just tremendous to be able to listen to for that. Appreciate you so much, at least for that, with coming on. As we kind of exit and close out for at least today, I know I just wanted to say, Padric, he said that he wanted to also help contribute for some of these things too. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot there just to push out just for all of that, to thank you at least for some of that as well, to be able to show that at least. And the fact that you didn't bring that up on your own, at least, I think shows some of the humility that I hope we all aspire to. As we close out for today, I wanted to get your perspective. The Cardinals, we've got an upcoming season. You've got the crazy mad genius Cliff Kingsbury, and you've got Kyler Murray coming into his second year. Do you have expectations for the Arizona Cardinals this year from kind of a perspective of someone who, like John and I, we follow the team religiously. Not everyone does. What do you think at least the Cardinals could accomplish?
That'll be interesting. I think I want to give a too strong a prediction. Like I said, haven't been tuned out a lot, but this year I'm really tuned in, given one of my old coaches is back there. And so given that, I'm going to say, I want to see a strong run. I know that kind of level of leadership in the locker room goes a long way. I think you have the pieces. I watched Kyler do some phenomenal things last year. And so a lot of people don't realize how big of a step that is for a college quarterback coming into a pro offense and the ability of things that they have to dissect there. And so now coming into this year here, I see him doing some exciting things. People in the division there, your units aren't as strong. You got Arizona pulling some things together. So, now, will they take the division? It's going to be a battle. What do you guys think, fellas?
I think they're going to take one of the 3 wild card spots, but the division, San Francisco is just a little too deep. But a year from now, could be having a different conversation.
Yeah, I said, I think if you get in there in a wild card spot, to me now, I think that actually puts you in an even better position to go win it all versus now taking the division there. You have a great season. A lot of times people get that bye. They come in a little rusty. They lose. Whereas if you can allow a young team like that to come in a wild card spot, it almost puts them back in that college mindset of emotion. And then when you have mature players who are able to ride the emotional wave, that's when you have magical seasons. So that happens. Let's say Arizona takes it if they come in with a wild card spot. How about that?
We like it, man.
I think that's what we're all hoping for, at least ultimately, is that you can at least be able to see all the work that all these guys have put in. John and I are psyched to have Buck back, at least as the D-line coach. I think that's going to be one of the more fun things to be able to watch for that one. Well, Padric, thanks again for being on here. Again, if you're tuning in, this is the Revenge of the Birds podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as Google Play Podcasts. We're on TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other places that your podcast can be found. We'll be back probably at least in maybe a week or two. We'll be wanting to take a look at some point around the NFL with some of the other teams and getting some of those projections. But in the meantime, take care, everyone, and go Cardinals.
Go Cardinals.